What if everything you knew about Blade was turned upside down? In Marvel's What If? Dark, the tomb of Dracula, the Daywalker faces his greatest nightmare, the possibility of becoming the very thing he's hunted his entire life. In this alternate reality, Dracula doesn't just want to kill Blade, he wants to enslave him. And with Blade's fate hanging in the balance, the battle between hunter and hunted will take a dark and dangerous turn. The question is, can Blade resist the monster lurking within? The story begins with Dracula soaring high over the London skyline, the iconic silhouette of Big Ben looming in the distance. As he flies, Dracula reflects on his long-standing nemesis, Quincy Harker. To Dracula, Harker is nothing more than a rabbit trapped in a cage, a man awaiting his inevitable death. Yet, even as he contemplates Harker's fate, Dracula's senses are drawn to something irresistible: fresh blood. Dracula's path takes him over a bustling carnival, but it's the scent of a woman walking near Dr. Deacon Frost's office that captivates him. Unable to resist the lure of her blood, Dracula decides that Harker can wait. He descends upon the woman, pinning her to the cold pavement. As she pleads for mercy, Dracula coldly informs her that her fate is sealed. But before he can finish the deed, Dr. Frost bursts from his office. "Did you not hear her? Get away from her," Frost roars, striking Dracula across the jaw with surprising force. In a split second, Dracula recovers, gripping Frost by his neck with ease. As the woman flees, Dracula dismisses her, declaring she is no longer needed. With a savage hunger, Dracula sinks his fangs into Frost's neck, draining him of his vitality and leaving him for dead. Satisfied, Dracula moves on, focused once more on his darker ambitions. Frost regains consciousness, weak and disoriented. He stumbles inside, collapsing before the ringing of the phone rouses him again. Annabeth is on the other end, urgently informing him that Vanessa is in labor and needs him immediately. Frost, still reeling from his encounter with Dracula, rushes to the room where Vanessa waits. Greeting her warmly, Frost approaches her. "Let's make this birth a memorable one, shall we?" Without warning, he violently clutches her hair, plunging his dagger-like fangs into her neck. The room falls into chaos as the other women stand frozen in horror as their friend's life is drained away. Frost, relishing in the terror he's unleashed, sneers at their futile attempts to fight him off. "I'm already dead," he says, turning to mist and escaping through a nearby window. Inside the room, only one woman remains to care for the newborn baby, born healthy despite the carnage. The others, including Vanessa, do not survive the vicious assault. In the heart of London, a brutal battle unfolds between Blade, the legendary Daywalker, and Dracula, the king of vampires. Inside a cathedral, Dracula taunts Blade. Disgusted by the blood they share, he reveals the truth of Blade's origins, mockingly calling Blade a byproduct of his bloodline through Deacon Frost. But despite Dracula's arrogance, Blade remains resolute, refusing to waver under the weight of Dracula's revelation. As the fight intensifies, Dracula, impressed by Blade's strength, shifts his goal from destruction to domination. Instead of killing Blade, Dracula decides to enslave him, turning the proud vampire hunter into his servant. But before Dracula can carry out his plan, Blade's team, Rachel Van Helsing, Frank Drake, and Quincy Harker, arrives just in time. Harker's wheelchair unleashes a barrage of wooden stakes, forcing Dracula to retreat in mist form, vowing revenge as he escapes into the night. Flying over the modern-day London skyline, Dracula reflects on how the world has changed since his last reign. He fears it will take too long to reclaim the power he once held, but as he lands on a rooftop and calls his warrior bats to him, he decides that the time for war has come. Dracula unleashes his insatiable, starving warriors upon a nearby market, their fury leaving devastation in their wake. As the bodies pile up, Dracula declares, "The living have ruled long enough. It is time for the dead to take control." Meanwhile, Blade, determined to stop Dracula, tracks him to a Christmas festival. With sword and stake in hand, he faces off against Dracula's warriors. As Blade dispatches his enemies one by one, Dracula watches from the shadows, taunting him. The vampires are mere fodder, meant only to lead Blade closer to the final confrontation. Dracula finally reveals himself, and as Blade stands unaware, Dracula sinks his fangs into Blade's neck. The scene shifts to Blade at his lover Saffron's apartment, as Saffron questions Blade's whereabouts. He suddenly bites her, claiming that they can be together forever. Dracula commends Blade for following his command, but Blade defies him, declaring that he is not Dracula's servant. Enraged, Blade vows to kill Dracula slowly and painfully. The two take to the skies in bat form, where Dracula questions how Blade can defy him, his bloodmaster. But Blade, slashing Dracula mid-flight, tells him, "You don't control me, Fangs." Their mid-air battle climaxes as Dracula slashes Blade's throat, sending him plummeting toward the river below. Yet before before Blade hits the water, he revives, roaring with fury and vowing to find and destroy Dracula. Back at the team's headquarters, Blade asks his team for help despite their initial mistrust. He convinces them by revealing his plan to use Harker's ability to hone in on Dracula's blood scent. Together, they track Dracula to his castle in Transylvania. When Dracula returns, he finds Blade has already dispatched his entire army. Furious, Dracula launches an attack, but Blade, his rage growing, fights back harder than ever. Dracula warns that Blade is becoming more undead with each passing moment, but Blade remains defiant, refusing to succumb to the vampire curse. In a final brutal exchange, Blade decapitates Dracula. Struggling to catch his breath, Blade looks at Dracula's fallen body and declares, "You will never kill again. It's over for you at last." But knowing Dracula's tendency to return from the grave, Blade pulls out a radio and says, "Harker, the big bad, well, he won't be big or bad any longer. I'm ready if you are." Harker asks if Blade is sure, to which Blade responds, "If you're safe, do it." Surrounded by the bodies of Dracula's fallen army, Blade takes a seat against the wall, exhaustion setting in. He radios to Harker once more, saying, "Okay, it's time. Not gonna let my vampire side take me over. So yeah, I'm ready. Do it." As Blade waits in the crumbling remains of Castle Dracula, Harker, Drake, and Van Helsing watch from a hilltop in the distance. Harker, somber, responds over the radio, "Rest in peace, Eric." The radio clicks off, and a massive explosion engulfs Castle Dracula, crumbling it to dust. As the trio watches the destruction, they reflect on Blade, not just as a warrior, but as the man they knew, Eric Brooks. Harker, the leader of the group, quietly says, "I think we're done here." The three exchange nods, and with heavy hearts, they walk off together, leaving behind the legacy of the Daywalker and the ashes of Castle Dracula. As the dust settles and both Blade and Dracula lie defeated, one thing becomes almost certain. A new era of chaos is about to unfold. Without the Daywalker to protect humanity, and without Dracula to control the vampire nation, a massive power vacuum is inevitable. And when power vacuums form, something or someone always rises to fill it. It's not a question of if, but when. With Dracula gone, his once unified vampire nation will undoubtedly fracture. Factions of vampires will fight for dominance, each one hungrier and more ruthless than the last. And without Blade to stop them, who's going to stand in their way? The answer is chilling. No one. Without the Daywalker, humanity is vulnerable, and the vampires, they'll be unstoppable. But the danger doesn't stop there. This vacuum of power isn't just limited to vampires. Dark forces that once feared Dracula's wrath may now emerge from the shadows. We're talking werewolves, demons, ancient beings that have waited for their chance to rule. With Blade and Dracula gone, the supernatural world will spill out into the streets, unchecked, unchallenged, and humanity will be left to fend for itself. The question becomes, not if the world will change, but how dark will it get? Sure, other heroes could step up, Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, maybe even the Avengers, but without Blade's expertise, the fight against vampires and dark entities would be an entirely different battlefield. Could they really stop an army of vampires, or supernatural forces fighting for control of this new world? With the darkness of corruption spreading, the future of this universe looks bleak, almost guaranteed to spiral out of control. Dracula may be defeated, but it leaves one haunting question. What happens when someone is consumed by corruption beyond control? Imagine the unimaginable. The Silver Surfer falling to the corrupting force of the Infinity Gauntlet. Could anyone resist that kind of darkness without destroying everything? Find out what happens when ultimate power meets ultimate corruption.